I found out wife was impregnated on one night stand. She was begging to raise her affair child. I was shocked to know who the father was. My wife and I met in 2008 when we were both traveling. We met in Madrid, and it was a very stereotypical meet cute. Our eyes met from across the bar, and I approached her. We ended up going home together that night. We spent the next 3 days doing it and drinking and soaking up the sun, and decided to keep in touch. She went home, and I finished my travels, and we began a year-long long-distance relationship before I moved to be with her. Over the course of the long-distance relationship, she divulged to me that she had cheated on a previous boyfriend and felt bad about it, but felt his choice to dump her was over the top, and that cheating wasn't always a silver bullet, especially since it was only a kiss. I realize now that she was sizing up my reaction and almost certainly cheating. This I can actually forgive and let go because duck long-distance relationships, and it's in the distant past, but not what happened last week. I told her at the time it was a deal breaker, and if I caught her so much as flirting with another man I would dump her. There are two absolute no-nos in a relationship. A year after I moved we got married, and a year later again she fell pregnant. I was overjoyed. She seemed distant and sad and anxious the first 2 months after finding out, and eventually, after I poked and prodded, she broke down and told me she had a one-night stand around the time of conception and the kid might not be mine. I was on a plane back home 2 days later and didn't speak to her for a month. I ignored all her messages and calls, but eventually I caved and we talked. She said she was going to get an in utero paternity test, and if the baby wasn't mine she would terminate, but that she wanted me to come back first. I went back and she got the test. I was in the room when she got the results. Not mine. I told her she was scheduling the appointment that day, or I was going to a divorce lawyer as soon as I left the hospital. She scheduled the appointment for a week later. The day of the appointment I drove her and held her hand, as it, under any circumstances, is a traumatic event for a woman. In the car she broke down in tears and begged me to wait, change my mind, try to make it work, anything but go through with it, and I looked her dead in the eye and told her, "Do whatever you want, it's your body and your life, but I will not raise another man's child. That child will be the living embodiment of your betrayal, and a daily reminder of what you did. I will not subject myself to that. Termination or divorce." Edit for detail. I wanted a divorce. As soon as she hesitated I jumped right to divorce. I never tired to talk her into it. I advised against the termination. She didn't want to keep the kid and lose the marriage, she wanted both. She told me directly that she would do it if I left her regardless. She even told me before I flew back that even if the baby was mine and I divorced her she would be getting it. She wanted specifically to keep the child and have me raise it with her, and unless I stayed she was getting it no matter what. That was not happening. She asked me if she had it if I would give her another chance. I said yes. I loved my wife. Sue me. I am not sorry, I refused to play daddy to her infidelity spawn. She got it. There were complications and she was on bed rest for a month. For a while after she was short with me. Unaffectionate and cold. We lost the spark. I tried, she didn't. She told me one night after a few drinks that she resented me for making her choose. I told her I was glad she got the termination as she deserved to suffer for what she'd done. I regretted saying this out loud immediately, even though that is exactly how I felt and still feel. One day I came home early from work and found her crying on the couch with a man next to her holding her. A man I'd met many times before. A man she worked with. The look on their faces told me everything I needed to know. He was the father. It wasn't a one-night stand. After I dragged him out of the house by his neck she admitted they'd had a 3-month affair. I will never know if this is the extent of the truth. To this day I accept that and have stopped asking. I began divorce proceedings and immediately kicked her out of the house. She begged and cried and pleaded for months and again, stupidly, I broke and took her back. I told her she had to quit her job and cut contact. She agreed and made the call there and then. We moved away from her city and bought a house in mine in the other end of the country. We went to marriage counseling and got better. Slowly but surely we went from strength to strength. We now both had total transparency on all accounts and accepted that's the way it was. As time went on, I stopped looking on her phone. Things were great between us. Our closeness was great, we're both travel junkies and went on lots of trips, and started talking about having kids. We tried for 2 years to conceive a child, and it hadn't happened yet, but the practice was a lot of fun, so what the hell? This was the case for years. I was completely unguarded and my defenses were down when the most recent event happened. She had gotten slightly distant for a couple of months, but not so much that I was worried. I asked her about it, and she always made a point of being affectionate when I did and assuring me it was all good, but her default, when not being prompted, was to be quiet and seek out her own space. She was out drinking with her friends one night and I stayed at home. I woke up at 4 a.m. and heard her voice downstairs. I went out and asked if that was her, no answer, she didn't hear me. I guessed pretty quickly that she was on the phone, and due to the time it was, her recent withdrawal, and her dubious relationship with loyalty, I decided to listen in. She was laughing and flirting, and saying crap like "I miss you too" and "I love you too." I knew it was him, I was certain of it. Then she started talking about the hotel, how good the room service was, and when she could see him again, and I had heard enough. I charged down the stairs like a bull, and she knew she had been caught. She started yelling and screaming and cursing me, shouting that she'd been to a doctor here, and she'd told her during the termination there was some sort of a problem. She was drunk and slurring her words and crying, but somewhere in the minutiae of words like tear and scar tissue and permanent, I got it out of her that her organ had been damaged, and it was unlikely she could ever bring a baby to term. She'd found this out 3 months prior, right around when she started getting distant again. I grabbed the phone out of her hand. She tried to take it back. We clawed back and forth until I shoved her back on the couch and told her not to get back up until I told her to. I sat on the chair opposite her and went through every detail. A half-dozen text messages from him asking when she was going to be leaving the bar, and that he missed her voice, and how much fun they'd had. Obviously all the other messages had been deleted, but she hadn't had a chance to delete the ones from that night yet. I read the messages aloud and she stared at me. I asked her over and over to explain herself, and eventually she jumped up and started screaming again. She screamed that she'd taken a day off work and dove to meet him halfway, and they did it in a hotel all day. She screamed that when she got the news from the doctor she saw me as an enemy, and he was her ally. She screamed at me that she wasn't sorry, and that I'd ruined her life. I yelled back that I was glad she got it, and if I could destroy him, and take that away from her too I would. It was open-handed, but proportionately much harder than she hit me. She fell back onto the couch, and looked at me stunned and in disbelief as she held her face and began to sob. She reached for her phone and I snatched it away from her, before throwing it and smashing it against the wall. I went up to my room and paced back and forth, and she sat downstairs crying, and that's where we stayed until morning. When I went downstairs she was asleep. I woke her up and told her to get a shower and get out. That I'd already made an appointment with my lawyer to file for divorce, and she wasn't staying in the house while I was gone. She sobbed and begged me not to go through with it. She said she was drunk and didn't mean it. Said she only made up the story about meeting him to hurt me, and that I was her one and only and blah blah blah. She said she was sorry she slapped me and didn't want an apology for me slapping her back, that she deserved it. I agreed she deserved it and told her it was good she wasn't waiting for an apology, because she would be getting one. That was last week. This week she's back living with her parents. She calls me every day. 10 times a day. She sends lengthy, weepy text messages that I don't read or reply to, as my lawyer says I shouldn't contact her unless through him. I'm going forward with the divorce. I was shocked when my former coworker called me and told what my cheating wife was doing in my office while I was away. Hello everybody. I can't believe I'm here, but I don't know what else to do. I love my wife, but I'm really scared that she's doing something behind my back. I can't talk to friends and family because it's too embarrassing and messed up. I think my coworker may have ducked my wife and it's looking like it may be true. I am 36, met my wife, F32, at a mall in our city back in 2014. My wife, let's call her Gabby, was in the food court in the line when I saw her. It's a funny thing, I was actually trying to go in another restaurant, but the line was too long. Getting in line at the restaurant where she was, I saw her standing at the front. And when she looked at me, I couldn't believe how gorgeous she was. When she saw me, she laughed and said she wasn't in line for food. Gabby said her cousin worked there, and she was waiting for her to come out. I was happy as hell that she spoke to me, because I couldn't figure out what to say to her. Thanks to that, I was able to break the ice with being humorous, and we talked while she waited for her cousin. I could see I was definitely making a good first impression with her. I asked her while she waited for her cousin did she want me to buy her some food, and she said she wanted a strawberry lemonade instead. After buying it, we talked some more, and I continued to be flirtatious and funny with her. When her cousin came out, I asked for her number, and she gave it to me before they left. After that, I did everything I could to sweep her off her feet. After going on some dates, events, and me and my friends hanging with her and her friends, we made it official we were dating. In 2017, me and Gabby had got married. After having 3 kids, we had our own family. After having 2 girls and our son being the middle child, we grew into being great parents for our kids. It wasn't easy, but we gave up always going out to clubs and concerts, but we still found time here and there to have fun. Our nightlife was definitely cut in half for sure. I was happy to have Gabby as my wife, and I felt very lucky. She had a great character, but she's so gorgeous that my friends even gave me props. Gabby is Cuban and looks like a cross between the girl who had played Wonder Woman and Salma Hayek. She is curvaceous, has tattoos on her arms, and always has a ponytail. You'd know her for sure by her always wearing a type of ponytail, especially in her selfies. We make good money since I work as a maintenance man. Gabby and her sister are interior decorators and make good money too. Technically, her sister is the interior designer. Gabby just jumped on board when she saw it was getting successful. I love my job and I've worked here for 7 years. But I never thought someone here would get to my wife. The trouble came last Wednesday. There's a guy that works in shipping area, let's call him Daryl. I'm not really friends with Daryl, but he is an acquaintance to me and we talk during lunch. The most time I hung with him was probably when we were shooting dice in the parking lot at the job. We only hang at lunch and talk about the basketball games. One weekend, my car had brake problems, and I couldn't drive it to work, so my wife drove me there and picked me up after. The first time she accidentally came too early, and had to wait about 30 minutes for me to come out. When I came out, I saw her laughing and talking to Daryl and a girl that work in the office, let's call her Brianna. After introducing her as my wife, we had small talk for a little while and we left. Looking back, I think that is where it all began. I think Daryl may have gotten to my wife, and it started that week when she had to come and pick me from work. When I got off work, I would see my wife hanging with Daryl and Brianna. They would be in the office hanging out listening to rap music on Daryl's Beats by Dre that's connected to his phone. Gabby said she liked talking to Brianna and would hang out in the office with her and Daryl. I knew Brianna and Daryl lived close to each other, so they were good friends, and that's why it didn't really bother me to see him around them as well. Since that week, Gabby would come to my job to talk and hang with Daryl and Brianna. Since Brianna was supposed to be Gabby's friend, I didn't mind her visiting sometimes or talking on the phone. But Daryl being around talking to Gabby was something I overlooked. My wife gets a lot of attention, especially on Instagram, so I always tried to keep myself in check even when I saw Gabby and Daryl talking without Brianna around. Jumping into conclusions would just piss Gabby off and we'd be arguing in Spanish every day. Last Wednesday was when my fears came up about my wife possibly cheating on me. One day when leaving my job, I was telling a friend at work goodbye. He was on the phone at the time and he said goodbye as well. I stopped when he told the person on the other line that it was me telling him goodbye, and I was curious because he said my name like this person knew me. I asked him who he was talking, and he just smiled and said it was an old coworker of ours. Telling me to wait, he said this person wanted to talk to me really quick. Giving me the phone, I was actually happy to hear from this guy. Talking to my old coworker, let's call him Tyrell, we caught up since I didn't know why he left. He said his brother worked in a warehouse in Atlanta and Tyrell said he moved down there since his brother promised him a job with him. Then he had decided to rub it in by saying he now make more than us in a playful way. After catching up, he said he wanted to ask me for my phone number, because he wanted to talk to me about something. I said sure and he told me to DM him my number on Facebook. I said okay and gave my friend his phone back. After sending him the number, he called immediately. I didn't even make it to my car yet. Picking up, I asked him what was up. He asked me was I in my car, I said yeah. He said not to drive yet because he really had to tell me something. This really sounded strange as hell, so I asked him what he was talking about. He said I can't tell nobody he told me this, and I agreed. He asked me was Gabby still coming up to my job, and it surprised me. I said yeah, and he asked me was Daryl still talking to Gabby, and I said yeah, and he was making me nervous asking about them. He told me didn't want to start anything, but he think Daryl ducked my wife. He said since he don't work with us anymore, he didn't care, so he wanted me to know this. Hearing this sent a big chill down my spine. I asked him how he knows this, and he said he had saw them. When he worked with us, Tyrell was a floor leader, so he moved between the departments. He said while walking he always saw Gabby and Daryl talking to each other. And he told our coworkers he really wanted to duck Gabby. And he said he would always make comments about her backside. I asked Tyrell when he would see them together, and he said it was almost an hour before lunch. He said he would see her talk to Brianna sometimes, but he saw her talking to Daryl more. Tyrell said even though it looked like he was flirting with Gabby, didn't know if something might be happening until she visited him on Saturdays when Daryl's department had to work overtime. This was a surprise to me because I almost never worked overtime. It didn't make sense why she would be there. I asked Tyrell was he sure she was there on Saturdays, and he said he was definitely sure. He said he was pretty sure Daryl might be ducking her when she had visited one Saturday. Since there's not a lot to do on Saturday, they had a lot free time and Daryl would have his Beats by Dre music speaker playing. Even though Gabby was there hanging out, this was normal to Tyrell. But after a while he came back and said he heard loud Spanish music playing. Looking in, Tyrell said things was getting sexual with Gabby and the guys. He said Daryl had Gabby by her neck while she twerked for him. My wife wasn't exactly botilicus, but she had enough that she could twerk if she wanted. I froze when Tyrell told me this. I asked was he sure, and he said he was absolutely sure, and that he's not blind. He said everybody watched as she bounced it for him, and he even lifted her shirt to show her backside in her leggings. I asked him did she try to stop Daryl, and he said no. He said all she did was laugh and twerk for him while he had her by her neck. He said she looked like she was trying to win a contest. I couldn't believe what I was hearing from Tyrell. He said he was sorry, and I need to keep my wife from him. He said that includes Brianna as well. I said thanks for telling me all this and hung up not long after. I felt very humiliated by this. Driving back home, my head was racing like crazy. What was worse, Gabby twerking for Daryl had to have been 7 or 8 months ago. Who knows what's been going on ever since then? They probably took it to his place, and she did more than twerk there. I had to ask Gabby what was going on, and see if she'd be honest with me. Getting back home, my wife was on the phone with her mom. After small talk, I asked her did she meet with Brianna today, and she said yeah. I asked her did she see Daryl as well, and she said no. I told her I was actually surprised because they seemed like the Three Musketeers. She told me Daryl really don't be around that much, and it just be her and Brianna, which even I know is total bull. After that, my wife just walked past me and into kitchen for her phone and started texting probably her friends. I couldn't believe my wife flat out lied to me about her relationship with Daryl. Even I noticed how much he was around her, and I was hurt by what was looking obvious right now. After that, all I could do is watch her make dinner for our kids and feel sad what's going on right now. I'm really depressed, and my head got me in a combination of rage and tearing up. Right now I need proof that something's going on. But it's going to be really hard since it involves people that work with me. I don't want to lose my job, and I can't use what Tyrell said because it was just twerking, and that's not good enough for divorce. Besides, they'll both just lie and say it didn't happen. Plus, my wife can say she was bringing Daryl lunch or something, and the old lady that's the security guard would let her in. I have to assume my wife cheated on me. My wife had secretly met up with Daryl and twerked for him, and that was 8 months ago. So much time had passed, and there's no telling what happened since then. I need to know how to get actual proof, so I can use it in divorce if everything is true. I need to be careful because I don't want to lose my job, and I know her family will attack me if I don't get evidence. We'll update if I figure out what to do.